Good morning to everybody. Stefano Masra, Geopolitics from Italy. Today we have a super guest that is Ilya Ponomarev. I will make a super short bio. Ilya is a Russian-Ukrainian politician who was a member of the State Duma from 2007 to 2016. He was the only member of the State Duma not to vote in favor in the Russian gay propaganda law and vote against the Russian annexation of Crimea 2014. Following the start of 2022 Russian invasion in Ukraine, Ponomarev started, he had joined Ukrainian territorial defense forces and he denounced the invasion. He is also the author of a book, and we will talk about it later. Does Putin have to die? The story of how Russia became a democracy after losing Ukraine, that was released on 4th October of 2022. And for me, it was an honor that he accepted this invitation. So if you have any type of question, I'm collecting while we will start to introduce. So Ilya, thank you for being with us. If you want to start a little bit with a mini description of who you are, what you're doing, and whatever, and then we will start with a little bit of chat.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Thanks for the invitation. It's a great audience, and I'm very honored to speak to you all, guys, and thanks for coming and listening to this. I'm indeed probably a rare creature for Russian politics, as I several times switched careers between business and politics. When I was still a kid, I was very much involved in the different youth movements, which was at that time growing in the that time Soviet Union during perestroika times. Gorbachev inspired a lot of them. And then when the Soviet Union was coming to its end, I was thinking that entrepreneurship, that's what would change the world. And that's where I should be part of. And I founded several technology startups in the beginning of 90s, several exits from them, then moved to large businesses, was working in Schlumberger, which is a large international company, and Yukos, which is the largest company in Russia and the largest oil and gas company, one of top 5 at that time. It was one of top 5 in the world. And I was supervising all the new technologies in the company as its vice president. And then moved back to politics, because then when Putin came to power and it was clear that he would make nothing good for the country, and after he squashed the main independent media station called NTV, I moved into politics, resigned from business activities, and since that time I was very much involved in the political life. On the left-wing side of the political spectrum. So yeah, for 10 years I was in Duma. In Duma I supervised economical modernization, new technologies, venture capital, foreign investments, was one of the architects of the reset policies between the United States and Russia. There were a lot of hopes associated with this, but unfortunately Mr. Putin decided to violate the constitution, go for the 3rd term of his. And by that time, everything basically went down the drain, and eventually that's all resulted in 2014 into a major war between Russia and Ukraine. And since that time, I'm doing my best to resist this war. Since 2014, I cannot back into Russia. So for 2 years, being an MP, I was an MP in exile, voting via proxy, without being able to actually come to my parliamentary seat, which is pretty ridiculous. But so since 2016, I'm living in Ukraine. In 2019, at that time, President Poroshenko awarded me honorary citizenship for merits for the country. And yes, when the invasion started, I started doing everything possible to actually confront the invasion, and not with words, but with deeds. So we now have military units which are made of Russian nationals who are in the front lines resisting the invasion. We have growing network of urban resistance inside Russia. doing very much with the same. We founded a new media which is talking to Russians in Russia and preparing them for the upcoming change. So that's where I'm focused at right now. And probably the last project to mention is that in November last year, I participated in the creation of, to my mind, the most ambitious and the most promising political initiative of the Russian opposition, which is called Congress of People's Deputies. That's an assembly where all the former MPs, which were legitimately elected when it was still possible, so when there were internationally and nationally recognized elections, so they created a shadow parliament. And now we're in the process of creating a new legislation for the future Russia. We just finished yesterday, actually. It just concluded the third plenary session of this Congress. We concluded hearings on the transitional constitution and several new basic laws that we are passing. So we are preparing for the country which will be created after Putin.
Okay, perfectly. Some questions. First, when we will talk about also your book. A question that is more interesting, like for the, let's say, Italian or Western public. What do you think is the real reason of the conflict on the side of the Russian Federation? Because we are told, we have been told that the main problem was like the enlargement of NATO. It was like the problem of the Russian security after the Munich speech of Putin in 2008 and blah, blah, blah. What do you really think as, let's say, a former MP and with experience with Russian politics, the real reason that, let's say, forced the Russian elite to, let's say, at the beginning, help Girkin and like the DPR, LNR to create a little bit of conflict in the East and the annexation of Crimea, and after the invasion of 2022?
Well, I think it's a very important question. Obviously, there are a lot of debates about this, but I'm absolutely certain that the beloved president of Russia, Mr. Putin, is a mere crook. He is not, a Mussolini or Hitler or Mao or whoever. He is not a great dictator with some bold vision of what he wants to achieve in terms of future of Russia, the world, whatever. I think that he wants to be rich, he wants to be powerful, he wants comfortable life, and he wants all this to be preserved indefinitely. And he is always acting very opportunistically. He's a very tactically minded person. So when he realizes that it slips out of his hands, then he starts to do something to mobilize the society, to consolidate the society, to inspire people to get around the throne. And I think that's exactly what was happening. I think that the annexation of Crimea was obviously not dictated by like imaginatory NATO bases in Crimea. Everybody who can look at the map would understand that anyway, the majority of Black Sea coastline is already in hands of NATO. So by getting just additional piece, what is the difference? In terms of the war in Ukraine, this justification about NATO, that's absolutely obvious that it's going in the opposite direction. By starting this war, he already managed to get Finland and Sweden into NATO, which was never the case. It's like, they were always neutral in this regard. Plus, additionally, Ukraine now, it's real that it will be in NATO before 2022. I think that the chances for Ukraine to be in NATO were extremely slim. Now everybody is saying not if, just when. So I think that's just an excuse. That's not the real reason. Money. That's what is driving him. And today is is a sad day. Obviously, Mr. Berlusconi passed away, and to everybody who like him, my condolences to all Italian people. It's very easy for Italians to understand because Mr. Berlusconi was Putin's role model. He taught him how to do cosmetic surgeries, how to gamble with media. I several times met Berlusconi in my life. He even once tried to seduce my girlfriend and was talking, how Russia was lucky to have somebody like Putin who is not restricted by those bloody judges, by the judicial system, that he managed to keep all those bastards, in his hands tightly. He was his guru, his star, and Putin, without the limitations, the constraints that Italian political system is imposing on its politicians, he was doing something like this in Russia.
Yeah, like the main difference, I think, that we have like the three levels of the power that is completely separated: executive, government, and judgment. Plus the constitutional court, that it's like a big dam in Italy that was introduced after the end of the Second World War by the US, because Germany and Italy didn't have a constitutional court before the end of the Second World War, and was imposed to, let's say, don't have a chance to be recreate this dictatorship like fascism or Nazism. And I think that like Berlusconi could, let's say, could be a model for the communication, but in Italy was very, let's say, contradictory, because now, let's say, everybody is saying time is finished, because it was like the last 50 years of Italy in industries, the private television, politicians, whatever. But for sure was very dividing the society into groups, pro or against. The main difference.
And Putin was doing exactly the same. And as you absolutely correctly said, that Mr. Yeltsin created such a constitution when there was no those checks and balances. If they would have been in place, Putin would not be successful in disrupting democracy, as well as Mr. Berlusconi was not successful in disrupting democracy in Italy, despite all his charisma and media and wealth and whatever. He pushed the boundaries, but it was a pushback. For Vladimir Putin, there was no pushback, because the institutions were not ready for this.
What I saw, in my opinion, when I was, because I travel a lot of the world, I went many times in Russia, also in China, whatever. I had like my mentor, that was like the former president of House of Representatives in Italy, Luciano Violante, said to me like that the democracy, it's the best system that you can use, but it has a big problem, that it's slow. What I saw, it's real. Like, for example, in Russia, you want to do like the Kerch Bridge. You did it. We are trying to make the bridge that connect Calabria and Sicily by the last 50 years, and it's not working. So there is pro and against. I think that China is the same. They connected Macau, Hong Kong, whatever in 1 second. For do a bridge like this, we need 1,000 years in Italy. But there is pro and against in systems. So let me put another question, and then I have a question from the public. Like, what is your opinion of the current state of the Russian economy and its future? Then I will show you some slides, because I'd like to have your opinion, because you were an insider. If we can check some slides together, we can see that like the media are talking that the export of Russian oil is no problem, blah blah blah. But if you look at if we look about the profit, the profit collapsed, like the same quantity, but it's in rubles. It's 1/3 of the profit that it has, like in April 22. The other thing that it was like a myth at the beginning, the value of ruble. Ruble, it's very strong. Sanction has no effect, and now it's like over 880. The change. Another slide that I wanted to show to you, it is about the confrontation between the first trimester 2023, first trimester 2022, and this is like official data of Minister of Economy of Russia that could be true or fails, but if it fails, for sure it's better than the reality. And we can see that the total income is minus 20%, oil and gas income minus 45%, and expenses that is connected to the war, it's plus 45%, 44. So with this data, that it's like official data from Russia, so it's not from USA, CNN, blah, blah, blah. What is in a state that is very dependent in his economy about export of oil and gas? What is your let's say forecast about what could be about the future of Russian economy if the war will last 1 year and the sanction will stay another 1 or 2 years?
Yeah, that's the main problem is about this time horizon. What you just said in your last phrase is altogether, obviously, the economy is heading towards a disaster. Because you absolutely correctly said that there is a drop of income, there is a growing deficit, there is a huge military spending. There is a problem with integration with the global economy, and like spare parts and whatever. Imports has dropped significantly. The living standards declined. But it's all long-term things. It's not short-term. Mr. Putin was running economy extremely conservatively. When many countries use the for example, energy proceeds to develop themselves, to invest in something, invest in, in domestic infrastructure or in foreign assets if you are afraid of inflation back home. He was
Ilya,
just
if I can put like something like to say something the same way of you. I studied in Norway and I was shocked that only 6% of all the revenue from oil selling could be used like in the current spending. Like they are saving 94% of all the income from oil and gas for the future generation. And I was shocked because like this small nation with only 4 million inhabitants has like the biggest state fund in the world. So it's as you said, they have like a vision of the future instead of like spending.
Yeah, but here the key thing is that the state fund of Norway is a major international player in terms of strategic investments. Russia created a similar fund, but it's not being invested. And when it's being invested in giving money to Putin's closest friends, that they can spend them on something like Crimean bridge that you were mentioning, because the budget for that construction is inflated at least 2 times from what it should have been. The Olympic Games in Sochi, it's in Russia was a popular joke that we are the only country which want to make winter games in the southmost part of Russia, which is the only part of Russia which is climatically subtropic. We have a lot of places in Russia, like Siberia, was specifically designed for winter games. But no, they picked up the warmest place in the country to spend more money, and that's the intention. So that's a very different thing. But still, even with all this nonsense, that means that they have a lot of just cash sitting on their accounts, and that would cover the gap for the deficit, which is obviously there at the moment, And so that would easily drag for another 2-3 years without a problem. Then it would collapse. But Putin does not care about this time. He needs money now. He needs to finance the war now. And right now, he's capable, unfortunately.
Okay. One that is very specific to you. Like from your experience as a former parliamentarian of the Russian Federation, can you tell us how the state and its institution works? Like, because it's very curious for me, because I didn't say to you, but I'm let's say I'm a local politician, but for fun, because I am a town councillor from 2009. But in Italy, it's only like to make fun for the others. It's not paid; it's for free. So if you want to contribute, it's like giving your time, and my salary it's about, I don't know, 50 euro for years. So I spend more that I have to go to the town council and return back than the salary. So it's something like give your time to the community. But I'm interested. It's functional Duma. Like you can do something if you are a member of a parliament, or it's very vertical system. Why I ask you this? I was interested like to try to. I'm working in waste management. I went in Russia many times, also in Moscow Oblast government. I went like to talk also to a mayor of a town that is called Krasnoarmeysk. It's next to Pushkin, northeast of Moscow. And they said to me, like a phrase in Russian that I cannot repeat, but like, you are a good guy, but a good guy, it's not a profession. But you can understand like in Russian. And they said to me, if the order of change the system of waste management, it's coming like from the top, I will do it. If not, it's a good idea, but it's not working. So can you explain like to the public how like the institution works, if it's vertical, if the local level can design something or no?
No, obviously, I can give a whole lecture for several hours on the constitutional design and the work of public institutions, but I will put it simply. Right now, there are no institutions. Just simply none. Even those which were theoretically designed, but even again, Yeltsin was designing the constitution, didn't want it to exist. He wants to concentrate all the power in his own hands and then delegate some. But at least that guy had certain ideals. He had certain desires about how to make Russia, a free state, democratic state. He never understood what democracy is, because he never believed in the institutions, in these checks and balances. Checks and balances, but he's the boss. That was his thing. But Putin completed the destruction. Even Soviet Union under the Communist Party was a country of institutions. You always, because there were certain rules of the game, you could say that they were not good enough, that they were oppressive, that there was no enough back communication with the people, but at least everybody understood the rule of the game, and it was predictable. In the modern day Russia, there is one guy who makes decisions. The rest, that they depend on what kind of decisions he made. One smart guy described Russia as imitational democracy, and that's I think it's a perfect definition, because everything is just imitation. It's not real. It's not working. It's not functioning properly. Even there is no institution of the president. There is an institute of Mr. Putin. And when we had Mr. Medvedev, who was the president formerly, but he didn't exercise the powers of the president. Still, the boss was Mr. Putin, who was at that time the prime minister. So the power was with him.
No, Ilya,
even president is not an institution.
It was interesting for me, because I went like to study a little bit of Russian foreign policy in Gimo in 2016 for a summer master, and for international students, but for fun, not for work. And I put a question about like the new law that was in making in 2016, and like my teacher that was I will remember the name and say to you, but for sure you know him. And he said to me, no, but it's normal. It's like to make the actual legislation be operative till 2035. And I was shocked because I don't know, in 12 years in Italy we have, I don't know, 6 governments. It's not like to have a continuous government for 30 years of the same guys. And it was said with so innocence, like no, but it's okay, it's normal, like to make like this continuation of the legislation. And I don't know. It's very difficult to compare the Russian system with ours because it's so different and so vertical.
But you see, the issue is that, like, we formally in the last 30 years, we had, I don't remember exact number of prime ministers, but it was something like 10, maybe 8, you know. So it's like that would look very much like in a normal democracy, and that's exactly why I say that it's an imitational democracy, because on the surface it looks perfectly well, you know, elections, terms, you know, changes, you know, rotations, you know, competition. No political party in the State Duma has 100% of seats like it was in the Soviet Union time, you know, 60%, which is, you know, in many Western countries would be the same, like opposition. But it's all fake. None of them are real. And these changes in the government, that doesn't mean that there is a change in the policy and change in how the decisions are made. Even when there is a change in the president, it's not a change in terms of who makes a decision. It continues to be the same guy, and that's exactly what I'm saying. It's just imitation. It's all fake.
Okay, some question from the public. Okay, it's not 42, but like is one of our, let's say, normal guest, is from Kabardino-Balkaria. It's from Nazi. What do you think would have been the outcome of Russia for the immediate and in the coming years if Russia chose peace at all costs, February 24, or even before in 2014?
Well, I think that the only chance, in general, the only chance for this elite to preserve itself is to actually try to return to the moment in 2014 before the war with Ukraine started, so before the annexation of Crimea. At that time, they may theoretically be able to get rid of Putin, put all the blame in the eyes of like ordinary people on Putin that it was his mistake, and they could like put some narrative like all the annexation of Crimea was great thing, but Putin screwed it up, something like this in terms of current propaganda could be working, and in this situation they would be preserved. And I think that in general, that's a certain threat, because I think that this is something where, for example, United States could agree with. And we personally do everything possible to make sure that something like this would never happen, because we want the system to be destroyed, completely replaced, and built anew. Putin has no chance of surviving, because somebody needs to be named as a scapegoat, and somebody needs to take the public responsibility for the failure. And he's the only option, exactly for the reason why we were discussing in the previous question. And that's exactly the reason why I think it's unlikely that it would happen, because Putin would never initiate such thing. There is no option when he could be preserved as a normal living person with the guarantees, protection whatsoever. It's just technically impossible. Even somebody would give him promises, he will not be able to deliver on them, and Putin understands this extremely well. That's why I think that the competition would be between this like inertia scenario and the fundamental change. We are at the side of the fundamental change, with all these military regiments, with the partisans, and I think with the most progressive part of the Russian society. And I think that we will prevail, and I think it would be in the very near future. I think that when Ukrainian army would be in Crimea, that would be it. That's the point which the system would not be able to survive. This regime is doomed to fail.
Another question that is more about geopolitics, because what is your opinion on China and India current stance toward Russia and the war? Like the neutralization of these two big states.
Right. I think that both countries are extremely selfish and egocentric. I won't use the word nationalist because it has certain other connotation, although with China we most likely can say it's nationalist, with India lesser so, but nevertheless they both extremely selfish. So they just, they take distance from the moral side of things in terms of this fighting, who is right, who is wrong, and whatever. So they want to use maximum for their own people. And they both are making money because of these natural resources. You absolutely correctly said about the revenues which are coming for the oil and gas proceeds. But in terms of physical volumes, on natural gas, the physical volumes dropped. On the oil, the physical volumes increased. They didn't drop. Russia is now selling more oil than it was sending a year ago, but for a fraction of price. So the discounts are great. That's why money which is coming to the economy are way smaller. But physical volume is large, and means that somebody is reselling it. And who is this? It's India primarily.
Ilya, only to show you another interesting slide that I already showed to the public, but I think that the people from Russia doesn't understand it. It's very interesting that China and India, it's importing a lot of oil more from Russia than before, not crude, not refined, because they want to refine it in India and China, because the most lucrative thing is like to refine crude oil. So Russia is like...
No, they also do oil laundering in this regard, because they cannot resell just Russian oil, so they need to do something with it.
Yeah, like being broker, like to European Union or whatever. But it's very interesting to me that in practical stuff, if we return back before February 22, like Russia had 80% of his, let's say, selling to European Union. Very good prices, very good client, because the European Union is like a stable country that pay every week. And from my point of view, let's put a little bit away like the conflict or whatever. It's stupid economically, because like you are like losing the let's say in a way of thinking that it's only economical, not politically. The best two friends of Russia were Italy and Germany in like importing oil and gas, especially gas. Now we are importing zero from Russia, 0%. So it's like in the economical way of thinking, it's like a little bit suicide in mid long term.
Not a little bit. Yeah, it's outright suicide, and I think that's again, just Putin understands the inertia of the process. So he's like that old French king is saying that after us, could be it's English word, the Bible thing. So so it can be a lot of rain, and which would wash everything down. So yeah. So.
Other question. Okay. How would you ever turn a country into democracy using strictly democratic means? What does it mean for a nation to be democratic?
Who said that? So we can reform the country using democratic means? It's impossible.
But this question is from Russia, so this is why.
No, I understand. It's simply impossible. I think that the only people who still believe that it can theoretically be possible are some representatives of Russian opposition. who just like stubbornly hitting their head in the same granite wall. Putin, when he started the war, he actually eliminated all the boundaries. So right now he started, a very violent and very bloody process. Hundreds, thousands of Russians are dying at the front lines, and tens of thousands of Ukrainians are paying with their lives for these crimes that Putin has initiated. And the only way how that can be stopped is with the military. No more protests can stop this. People who were protesting, they live in Russia, being encouraged again by Russian liberal opposition, were saying just leave, just go. So they live in Russia, and then who would protest inside Russia? Nobody. Who can do these changes? It's only armed people who are right now fighting alongside with Ukrainians, and who can come back to Russia. And they already started this process. Look at what's going on in the Belgorod region, or what's going already inside Russia with all the different type of urban attacks, and just the beginning. So they will eventually come to Moscow.
Yeah, Ilya, I was talking with Dimon and Sov, the Popular Politica, and he said to me something that it was shocking for me, because he was talking to me that he was arrested in Khabarovsk. Like for the European guys, it's like the one of the eastern city of Far East Russia, because he was filming as journalist, like some riots, and police came and say interrupt the video, and they say no, I'm authorized as a journalist, and they repeated, and he didn't stop, and like he was in prison for 1 week. And for me, like it said to me like that it's normal. And for me, I was shocked, like in my perspective, that like a journalist can be jailed only because he's doing his work.
No, 1 week right now it's vegetarian in terms of Russian standards. That means
Okay.
that he was pardoned. Because they could have put him there for 10 years easily, not for 10 days.
Okay, so last two questions, more technical. Okay, Novosibirsk dam bursting. What do you think about? Today I was watching like Twitter, Telegram, whatever. That it is another dam that was like burst in Zaporizhia region. And what do you think about it? Because today. There is a lot of, let's say, controversial news, like also in Western news, like who is doing what is having more advantage, the ecological disaster. What do you think about it?
I think there is nothing controversial here. It's extremely straightforward. It was done by Russian military. They were openly speaking about their preparations to do this. It was many times announced. There were a lot of leaks and intercepts which were published way beforehand that they're preparing this. They totally match and what have happened eventually in terms of where and how much and what. There is data on satellite surveillance done by Americans about what had happened. So it is absolutely clear. Russian military blew up the dam to prevent Ukrainians from crossing Dnipro and attacking Crimea. It's extremely straightforward military exercise, and what's happening in Zaporizhia, there's numerous smaller, dams which are being blown, just indicates who has done this one. Ukrainians are not blowing dams, right? It's done by Russian military.
Returning back to what we were talking about economics, also in this case, there is a huge blowback. If I'm thinking that I want to maintain Crimea, I will not have water this summer, because the biggest part of water was coming like from Novosibirsk dam. So
look, first of all, before this water supply was already severed for, I believe, like 5 or 6 years. So it was built in the Soviet Union times, but when the war started in 2014, I believe like in 2015 or in 2016, the water supply stopped. And there was a problem like for these 6 years. It was drought in Crimea. There were outages, but they were living somehow. The water supplies resumed when they actually taken over this part of Kherson region to resume the supplies. But those supplies, they lasted for a year. So right now the higher priority is not about the water supply yet. It's just an additional indication. It's it's an indication of the fact that they are not very hopeful about keeping Crimea. But it's also the biggest priority is in preventing the offensive, is to militarily defend the land. If it will be defended, then water supplies you can resume in the future. But firstly, you need to defend this territory, and right now the chances for this are getting slimmer and slimmer.
I will collect maybe the last question from the public, but this is like from me. Like in the West, we have a very conflicting news about the current state of the Ukrainian
Yes.
Ukrainian counteroffensive and like Russian defense. Why I'm asking to you, because Ukrainian are like silent a little bit. Russian are saying no, we are defending, everything is okay, blah blah blah. Can you give us your opinion about what is a realistic state of the end of the conflict might look like? In your opinion, like what you can say?
Look, I understand everybody is curious and impatient, but too much of information would ruin people's lives. It's a real war. And I've been very oftenly asked about our plans of our legion in Belgorod region. Guys, sorry, I cannot tell.
I know, Ilya.
Seriously speaking, I can speak only about the ultimate objective.
Ilya, what I was asking was different. Not about like plans, what will happen, blah, blah, blah. What could be the outcome of what is happening, in your opinion, or in your, let's say, expectation? Because looking like from a military side, it's one thing. Like the political side, it's another thing. Why I'm asking you this? To all my Ukrainian friends, I asked, could be, let's say, a chance to make a peace, let's say, to return back to the territory of 2014, okay? Like the situation of Crimea or Donetsk, Lugansk before February 22. And 99.99% of my Ukrainian friends say no. Like it's not possible a peace with, let's say, with this part of the territory still in charge of the Russian Federation. What is like your perspective? Like what could be like, let's say, something that could be the end of the conflict from the Ukrainian side?
To confirm what you're saying, 97% of Ukrainians, just ordinary Ukrainians, public opinion, is saying that no end of war before the restoration of the territorial integrity of Ukraine in full, including Crimea, Donbass, and all other occupied territories. 97%. That means that the war would continue. People are ready to make sacrifices, but to defend their country. They were ready for compromises before. Before the invasion of February 2022, certain people were saying, let's officially separate the occupied part of Donbass, something like this, in exchange for, guaranteed peace and something like this. After Bucha, after Irpin, after all the shellings, after Kakhovka, after all other things, people are absolutely certain we will prevail. We will kill the bastards, we'll wipe them out, and it's no matter what, any cost. We'll just do it. And the main question, obviously, is when that would happen. I think it would happen rather sooner than later. My anticipation that this year, Ukrainian army will be in Crimea. at minimum, my anticipation for this year that this land corridor that connects mainland Russia and Crimea would be cut into two, and Ukrainian army would make its own corridor to the Azov Sea. That's like program minimum. I think that it's easier to actually liberate Crimea than to liberate Donbass because of all the fortifications and everything that was built there for years. That's why I think that Crimea would be the easier target, and it would be more useful target, because I think that if Ukrainian army, when Ukrainian army takes over Crimea, that would trigger the fall of Putin's regime, because that's like they made themselves a sacred territory, which has paramount importance for the stability of the regime. And that's why I think that would happen, and after that the changes would start.
Okay, I have the last question from the public, then mine to close. So, but this is more like, what do you think that is the objective of Ukrainian attacks into Belgrade or drone strike to Moscow? Let's say that not Ukrainians. Let's say what is happening.
That's what I wanted to say. That Ukrainian never made any attacks on Belgrade.
I know. but because if it's officially, I think that the US will not give extra aid.
It's even unofficial. It's the factual side of things. Obviously,
yeah.
Did support.
Let's say an unofficial Ukrainian army. Let's say like this.
Yeah. Ukrainian did support all this, because obviously that's helping Ukrainian army. The incursion into Belgrade by our guys requires Putin to relocate some of its troops away from Ukrainian fronts and dispatch it alongside the Russian-Ukrainian border, and that means a lot of saved lives of Ukrainians there. So that's an obvious military objective. The attacks on Moscow, it's a certain retaliation of all those crimes that Putin was making on Kyiv and Dnipro and Odessa and other Ukrainian cities, and it's been done not in the way of shelling the residential areas like Putin is doing on Ukrainian cities, but instead of attacking the houses of the riches of the Russian elites, plus symbolically attacking the Kremlin dome. So it's more a psychological thing rather than a practical thing. Again, what Putin is doing on Ukraine, on Kyiv, and on other places. But what I really like about Ukrainian approach, lastly to say this, that Ukraine understands that the war should end in Moscow. It will not end in Ukraine. Even if Ukraine liberates all of its territory, that means that it's a front line which would be alongside the border, but it still would be a front. It still would be war. The only way to end the war is to make Putin go, to destroy the system. And Ukrainians are not going to do this. It's just Russians who are going to do this, and they need to help Russians who are willing and capable of doing this.
No, the provocation that I want to say to you, and last two things. Now, I traveled in Russia, but also in Ukraine, but less in Ukraine. I went to Kyiv only. I would like to see Odessa, blah blah blah. But I went many times also in Moldova, other former Soviet Union states. I went to Armenia, Belarus, blah blah blah. And the question that I have to give to you, it's like, do you think that the Russian public outside Peter and Moscow and the big cities have an idea that, because for me it's very, let's say, surprising that Russia has only 3% of the world population and 30% of the natural resources of the world. In a well-managed, let's say, government could be the richest state in the world GDP per capita. This is like, do you think that like the people from the revenue, from the let's for the Italian public, Western public, from the suburbs or little city can understand that the real richness of the country, it's in a very, very small of a Russian elite, Siloviki and friends and blah, 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 and it's not spread to the community.
I think that this one is being perfectly understood even among Putin's followers, even among his adepts. That's very well understood. It's just that people resigned to the idea that they can do anything about this. And that's why when those people who are supporting Putin, understanding all this, their rationale is if we support Putin, at least he would give us something. And, and that he stole already so much that maybe he would not steal that much in the future. And if somebody else would be coming, he would restart stealing. That's the rationale that I think. I'm not joking. That's what is being expressed all the time at the public meetings when there was deputy. That's what people say all the time.
Okay, I have the final question, but the last that it's about something that it's talking a lot these weeks in Italy and Western media about the position of Moldova. Because at the beginning of the conflict, there was this map posted by Lukashenko that the phase was to take Odessa and then reconnect to Transnistria. I was because I had an ex-girlfriend that was from Moldova. This is why I went many times, and I went to see Tiraspol in 2015, and it was a shock for me because when I went through the Dnipro to the Dnistro, there was the Russian peacekeeper company with tanks on the bridge between Bender and Tiraspol. And for me, in a peace, let's say, state, to see Russian forces was a little bit a shock. And what do you think that could be, if it could be a real, let's say, point of conflict, also Transnistria with the weapon depot that is in Kubasna or blah blah blah, or it's like a fantasy, a myth that it's in the Western media?
No, look, I think that the easiest path to a solution at the moment could have been if Ukrainian army would just liberate its territory. It's pretty small in size. Its depth is several dozen kilometers, and it's nothing. And it could have been easily done without much of casualties and whatever. And even for Ukrainians, it would be right thing to do because that's a potential threat. It's like Russian-controlled stripe of land in the backlines. But I think that the Moldavian leadership is reluctant to do this because they think it would be theirs anyway as soon as Putin would fall in Moscow and the regime would collapse. They would take it over anyway. And if Ukrainians would do it, then who knows? Maybe Ukrainians will not return this territory to Moldova, but keep it occupied or something like this, So they don't want to take even this risk. They don't want to take the risk of destabilization inside the country because there are opposition parties for whom this issue is extremely sensitive. Then they would play the cards that would pave the way to reconciliation of Moldova and Romania, and some people in Moldova are very afraid of such an outcome, and that all creates their rather passiveness in deciding on this issue. But I think that the moment when it was a real and serious threat that this piece of territory would be used against Ukraine, at least for a while, it's not there. Right now, Russian army is not capable of digesting and processing those territories that they already got, and that's why they were kicked out from Kyiv area, from Kharkiv area, from Kherson, from other places. So I think that right now it's just somewhere third, fourth, fifth priority.
Yeah, and the forces on field, if it's in the data, it's 1,500 men. So it's It's a very small force.
And even the majority of those are not Russians but locals. You know, they're formally under Russian uniform, but they're locals, and obviously, you know, they're not willing to go anywhere and to start fighting with Ukraine.
Last question, because I'm from Italy, and like, how can the international community help to end the conflict? Like, actually, like the final message, what could be something that could made more, like, to put pressure or to make more help aid? Also, for example, like in Italy, the main problem that I say to you from Italy, because I'm into politics, it's that it's secret what we are giving to Ukraine. For example, in US, you can check the list of everything. Italy is giving, but we don't know what we are giving. For example, some like defense system, that it's much better of a Patriot, it's new, blah blah blah, and it was like a big controversial issue in Italian politics because it's cost a lot. I don't know if it's 300 or 400 or 500 million for one battery, and it was given one or two to Ukraine. And what is, in your opinion, what the Italy or the international community can do more in this time to help?
No, obviously the mainstream answer, and it's the correct answer, is to give weapons to Ukraine. That's for sure is the correct answer, because the more weapons to Ukraine, the sooner the peace would arrive and the less casualties would actually happen at the fighting lines. Many people do not understand that. Some people think that more weapons means more fighting and more casualties. That's the other way around. When sides are more equal, that prolongs the fighting. When sides are dramatically different in the capacity, then the fighting significantly shortens. But, and by the way, also the modern weapons are more precise, and that also decreases the casualties. Outdated weapons of the Soviet Union, they don't care. You know? They just destroy everything around. But I wanted to point on something different. Right now, the West is extremely shy on even starting thinking about what would be post-war Europe and what would be post-war Russia. And I think it's a fundamental mistake. We are already at the moment when this Tehran 1943 conference, which happened during World War II, is already a long time overdue. We need to convene it and discuss it and see the vision for the future, because that's a very similar conflict which was during World War II, despite a smaller scale, but it's a similar type of evil. It's a similar international coalition which is fighting this evil. Ukraine is at the front of this coalition which is fighting this evil, but it's not capable to do it just by itself. And United States opinion needs to be taken into equation. European Union opinion should be taken into equation. Separate Eastern Europe and Baltic states opinion should be taken into equation. So we need to discuss. We need to discuss and come to the conclusion, and we need to create a political alternative to Putin's regime. We see that the Russian opposition politically is extremely weak. Russian elites understand that it's weak. Now they start to understand that there is already a military force, but they don't understand how this military force is separate from Ukraine, who is making the decisions. They don't understand the political leadership there. That's why we need to construct those two legs: the leg of the brute force that has been applied on the Putin's regime, and the leg of the political alternative. And unfortunately, right now, most of the Western politicians, there are these like well-known names of Navalny, whatever. We understand that they do nothing in terms of the change, that they cannot influence the change because they don't have this like armed capacity and whatever. But still, it's like a fail-safe thing to do, and we don't care whether it's real or whether it's leading somewhere or not. But it's fail-safe thing. No, we need to think practically. We need to think to the very end. We need to understand what is the scenario of the change. We need to draw the red lines, and we need to do it now.
Perfect. So that was like the answer that I was expecting. So it's very interesting for me that I want to close with you with this phrase because I read a lot of book about, like, let's say, the Soviet Union, also the collapse. There is a very interesting book that it's called At the Highest Level of Steve Talbot, that is discussing like what was happening the last period of Gorbachev, blah blah blah. There is another author that is very interesting that was hosted in our channel that is called Steve Levine, that was called
Yes.
The Llya and the Glory. A very interesting book. What was happening in Caspian Sea, and what I was very impressed is that the U.S. bureaucracy wanted more that Soviet Union was not collapsing technically, that the actual results, because it was easier to talk with only one elite in Moscow than with let's say the former federate state of the Soviet Republic. So probably, as you said, the politicians are a little bit shy because they don't know what could happen, and it's better to manage a situation that is more stable. So I agree completely in your point that there is not a decision point also in the European Union foreign politics, because it's still like a lot of states' personal interest. It's not a unique foreign politics agenda. So last thing to close, because I wanted to post this, just to remind to the public that Ilya has like a book. So I want you will find it in
On Amazon, you can find it. Yes.
In Amazon. I will put like the link in the description of the video, so you can check it.
Thank you.
If you can
And
say,
you know the answer, guys. You know the answer to this question. Yes.
if you can like say two things about the book, and then we will close the live.
Yes, it's the book is a product of a very long thoughts that started in 2012 when the protest movement in Russia on Bolotnaya has erupted. So it was originally a combination of both the political stories from the Russian politics, but the main thing is about to give an idea, to give a vision for the future of Russia just through the prism of this politics. So this version in English is an abridged version from the Russian book. Those of you who understand Russian, it's been published on my YouTube channel. It has both the text version and me speaking, reading the book, and it's way longer. But the English version is the abridged version made specifically for Western audience with some additions. But basically, that's the vision of future Russia and the vision of how to get there. And the understanding of who Vladimir Putin is in particular, but obviously it's not about Vladimir Putin, it's about the system. The empire needs to die. And what would happen to Putin personally, I personally don't care.
So, Ilya, thank you so much for your time. Wait a sec, when I close that I will say goodbye to you. For all the public, there is like the link on the description, so you can go to Amazon and take it. I hope to meet you in person so you can sign my copy. And if anybody have like any question or whatever, you can post it in the comments. There is like the official Twitter and YouTube account of Ilya in the description, so go and sign up. And thank you so much for give us your time, and I hope to see you soon.
Thank you. We will win together. We shall overcome.
Yes. Ciao, пока.